So I am going to just get my slides up here. So if all is well, you can see a little window that says Alight.
Yes, perfect.
Awesome. Okay, cool. So we're going to be mainly workshopping a little bit with Jill as she's joining us live today. And then as you're watching the replay, you're welcome to workshop these things as you go. And you are also welcome to email me with some of the answers to your questions. And like I was saying to Jill before we started, we will leave a little bit of time at the end so that if there is anything that she wants coaching on, we can coach at the end and she can let us know if she feels comfortable to do it on the replay or if she'd rather we do it off the replay. But either way, we're going to go through a couple of questions. Today, we're going to be crafting a career journey that really lights you up. And, oh, get my cursor here. Sorry, can you still see that? Okay, cool.
Yes.
Okay, cool. So just a little bit of intro to me and how I came to be talking about career and what lights you up. So my career journey, I think if I could use one word to kind of describe my career journey, it would be the word searching. I felt like I was constantly searching. And I studied to be a chiropractor. And while I was studying, I did a lot of tutoring. I qualified as a Pilates instructor, so I was teaching a lot of Pilates. And I just never really felt like there was something that I was doing that felt somehow sort of aligned to me, or it felt like something was missing, or that I felt like this isn't how someone should feel in their career, but I didn't quite know what I was missing or what I needed to do to solve that problem. So I worked in different environments. Like I said, did different actual work, but also within chiropractic, I had different work environments, different locum jobs, worked at World Spine Care as a volunteer, worked in different countries, the Netherlands, South Africa, and then Botswana. And so I was trying out sort of these different situations, and then also taking every single course that probably came along my path, just kind of trying to find that thing that was going to like solve this problem for me. And they weren't, it wasn't like I had this clear direction of like this is the courses I want to take in this area of like expertise. It was like everything. I was like sampling a bit of every single area that I could within chiropractic as well. So there was just a lot of searching. And I think what helped in the end was kind of a combination of getting to know my interests and strengths rather than what I had initially done, which is I had just sort of thought, as long as I'm helping people, I'll be happy. That was my assumption. And I realized that it's not just about helping people, but helping in a way that you feel connected to, that you actually enjoy doing, that is aligned to your natural interests and your inclinations and your strengths. So getting clear on that. And then also just in general, getting a clearer sense of who I actually was as a person, like reconnecting with what do I enjoy? What do I find interesting? What do I do when I have free time? So just reconnecting with that, I feel like there was this kind of personal journey in that. And then also there was a lot of making decisions from what I'll call like the wrong place or like things that weren't necessarily aligned with my values. So for example, I would want to do a career because other people accept that more, or it wouldn't be something that people misunderstand as much, whatever it is. I was kind of solving a problem that didn't necessarily connect with my deeper values, but I just wanted to be more kind of accepted and approved of. So it was a combination of a personal journey and finding something that really resonated with me, which was coaching. And when I found that, I sort of tried it out, I prototyped it, I really got clear before I left my job on like, what is it exactly that I enjoy about this? What is it that I don't enjoy about that? And just got really clear on that before I left my job now to do health coaching full time. So that's a little bit of my journey. And oh goodness, this cursor keeps doing weird things. Sorry about that.
Sorry, stress.
This is a little
It always works differently when you share the screen than before, and I don't know why.
exactly.
Always.
Exactly. Always. So this is kind of just a little bit of a visual of what I see as my kind of purpose, or my work that lights me up. Is I kind of see us as all having like this unique combination of things that make us us. And we have like our culture, our experiences, our upbringing, our childhood, our unique strengths, our unique interests. And we can all kind of create this like light or this fire as that. And as we do that, we impact others around us. We share that light with others, and we inspire other people to kind of light their fire.
Yeah.
And just kind of this visual of like all over the world, just like these little lights cropping up. That's kind of the visual that I have in my head when I think about this. And it's kind of like a visual representation of that quote that has always stuck with me, which is that quote about not asking yourself what the world needs, but asking yourself what makes you come alive, or in our case, alight, and going to do that. So the world needs people who have come alive. So it's almost like this thing of, like I was saying, with a helping thing, not directly going for, but how can I help the most? Going to like what makes me come alive, and we need people who have come alive. We naturally have impact on the world, and we'll talk about this a little bit later. We naturally want to help. We naturally want to have impact. We naturally want to share our work. We naturally want to be really good at what we do, if we focus on the things that make us come alive. And I want to acknowledge that we absolutely can find this in other areas of our life. So I don't want to say that work is the only place that you can find this fulfillment and this purpose and feeling like you lit up. Some people rather actually have their job as their security, and then they have something else that really fulfills them. I just find that because we spend so much time, so much of our life is spent at work, I feel like why not make that the thing that lights you up, that fulfills you, and that creates impact. But I just want to acknowledge that it can be done in many different ways. So today we're going to talk about some of the ingredients of work that lights us up and why it's so important for us. We're going to workshop a few questions to explore your interests and your curiosities and just get a sense of like who you are, or a clearer sense of who you are. And then get a sense of direction. So we're going to map out where we're going, and then all the sort of steps in between that to get you something really practical of like, what is my next step here? And then at the end, I will mention, you'll know the details of my coaching, but I'm just going to mention my coaching a little bit for those people watching the replay who are wanting additional support on this kind of work. I'm drawing on various resources for this presentation. If you want a list of them, I'm happy to send it to you. So I'm using Transcend by Scott Barry Kaufman, Regenerative Business by Sam Garcia, Mastery by Robert Greene, and then an area of intelligence, like learning about the types of intelligence, by a psychologist called Howard Gardner. And then the last few notes before we start, I will be sending the replay. So don't worry about like taking notes on everything, other than the questions that we're actually going to workshop, and those you're welcome to just send into the comment box so that I can kind of workshop them with you. And we're lucky to have Jill here. She is really great at kind of sharing her experiences and being open about that, and that's really awesome. We really, really appreciate that from you. But of course, if there's something that you don't want to share on this platform, that is absolutely okay.
Perfect. Thanks, Sue.
Awesome. Water. Okay, cool. So here are some different names. Sometimes we call it your calling, sometimes we call it your life's work, sometimes we call it your vocation, whatever you call it. It doesn't necessarily have to mean something religious or spiritual. It doesn't for me, but some people do have that inclination, and for them it might be more religious or spiritual, but it's just to say it doesn't need to be. You can sometimes think about like just being called towards the future, like there's something you're being called to achieve or to create, or some impact that you're being called to have in this world. We're just talking about having something that feels purposeful, that feels meaningful, and obviously has a positive impact on the world. And I just want to make it super clear that it's not about your career title. So someone can be in the exact same career as you, and you feel like it's a calling, and they feel like it's just their job. So it's not about the career title itself. And related to that, we're going to be talking now, there's a description of someone who considers their job a calling and how he describes that. And I'll ask you whether, to what extent you resonate, it feels like that's what your work is for you. But that doesn't mean that if you recognize like, oh, my job is calling for me, that means you have to change career. So please don't have this like, oh my gosh, now I need to change my career just because it's not a calling. Like I said, we can sort of create that, and it doesn't necessarily it's the career title that's the issue. Some of you on this call, know you want to be doing something else. Maybe you don't know exactly what it is, or maybe you have a very clear sense of what it is, but you just want to take that step. But there might also be people on the call or watching the replay that genuinely do want to stay in their career. They genuinely love what they do, but you have this sense of like, I don't want to feel this, if I'm going to feel anxious and burnt out and like this weight of responsibility and maybe not getting fairly compensated or whatever it is, like there's something about your career that isn't feeling great. So you have the sense of, I really want to stay in this career, but I don't want to stay if this is what it's going to feel like for the rest of my career. So either way, whichever category you fall into, it's really helpful to get an idea of the bigger picture and get an idea of your journey. And then it also becomes clearer whether you actually do need a 180-degree pivot or whether you just need to slightly go in one direction or the other. So I hope at the end of this that you have more of that kind of clarity. So this is a description, and we're going to just read through it. This is like a little man I don't know why he's little, but he's a man that considers his career a calling. So Mr. C's work is one of the most important parts of his life. He's very pleased that he's in his line of work, and because what he does for a living is a vital part of who he is, it's one of the first things he tells people about himself. He tends to take his work home and on vacations too. I'm not advocating for that, but the majority of his friends are from a place of employment, his place of employment, and he belongs to several organizations and clubs relating to his work. Mr. C feels good about his work because he loves it and because he thinks it makes the world a better place. He would encourage his friends and children to enter his line of work. Mr. C would be pretty upset if he were forced to stop working, and he's not particularly looking forward to retirement. So I'd like to know, on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being not at all, 5 being absolutely, how well does this describe how you feel in your work?
Sure. I would say probably like a 2.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. As hard as that to say.
Yeah, I was going to say, I know that can be hard to actually
yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, it's a good indication, right? Okay. Okay, so we build the fire. These are both ingredients to a calling or your life's work, however you kind of phrase that. But it's also the result of following your life's work or your calling. So it tends to be kind of like this cycle, this upward spiral, and they both kind of feed off each other. So health and well-being, if we think about health and we think about deep health or wide health, having a job that really feels like your life's work really positively impacts your existential and your emotional health, sometimes even your relational health. We might be more deliberate in prioritizing our health if we genuinely feel like we're an asset through which we are impacting the world, through which we are creating this incredible work because we believe in it so much. This is one of the parts that probably needs a little bit more, like I said, kind of deliberate prioritizing, because following your life's work and being really passionate about what you do can sometimes have an obsessive or kind of dominating quality, or where you just feel like you're overgiving. So I do recommend one of the things that I work with clinicians as well on is making sure that health stays a priority when you are pursuing this career that you really love. But sometimes we think of them as kind of coming up against each other, as in like either I fully lean into my career or I'm really healthy, and they don't have to be at odds with each other. The second thing is transformation. So we think about like, not only does pursuing your life's work or your calling create something in terms of what you actually do, but think of like the person that you become on that journey, like just the character that you build, the skills that you build, the resilience that you build. Because when we are really like going for it and we really love what we do, we are much more willing to like deal with the crap that comes along the way. We're much more difficult to deal with hard emotions. We're much more willing to deal with challenges along the way because we know what we're doing it for. We have a very strong why. There's a lot of joy and pleasure in the journey and the work itself. So you're not waiting for these huge moments of like, you know, promotion or moving to another job or you know, getting to a certain amount of income or whatever it is. You're not waiting for those big moments to feel happy and fulfilled, because the actual work itself, the day-to-day, like the nitty-gritty stuff, you really, really enjoy. And that's not to say that you'll never have any boring tasks, but the majority of what you're doing on just a daily basis, you actually genuinely find joy and pleasure in that. And then, like I said, the impact and the service, right? That comes naturally. It's like a natural byproduct of doing work that you love, because you genuinely want to share it with the world. You want to inspire others to also follow what their calling is. And you can also occupy like a very niche thing, like your service becomes so unique to you that you're kind of filling this little niche that no one else can. It gives you a sense of direction and purpose. You don't feel like lost and uncertain and like kind of going this way and that way. I sort of describe this as like, it feels like all of you is going in the same direction. You're not being pulled in different directions or like a little bit uncertain. You're kind of going for it. You're fully leaning in with all of you. And you feel part of like the bigger picture. You naturally to mastering something and developing expertise, because not only do you often like narrow quite a lot when you have your calling, but if you really love doing what you do, you will naturally be better at it than someone who has to like force themselves to do that work. Autonomy. So you can think of autonomy as like, I have the autonomy to pursue this life's work. And sometimes that's, I need to leave what I'm doing for me to pursue. Sometimes it's what they call job crafting, where in the job that you have now, you look for opportunities where you can, for example, take on roles that use skills that you don't feel are being used now, or interests that you don't feel are being used. You can shift what you're doing right now to, in some sense, like address these unanswered callings or life's work. And then financial freedom. So this is also something that generally follows when you're doing something that really lights you up, when you're fully leaning into it, you have mastery or expertise. And sometimes we have to trust that that financial freedom will follow. Sometimes it's not right away. And sometimes we do need something that just gives us that bit of security while we are pursuing this. We all have a different tolerance of risk, but just that trust of, if I really lean into this and it lights me up and I'm willing to go for it, the financial freedom will follow. And that's also not to say that you could just go and like do a hobby somewhere and people must just like give you money. It needs to be useful to the world, but that is what happens when we follow our life's work anyway. And then finally, relationships. So feeling like you have something that you deeply connect to. But think about, like, if you're following that thing that really lights you up, think about the people you're going to meet along the way. They're going to be people that also that you connect with so much stronger and that inspire you as well. So these are just some kind of partly reasons to pursue your calling or your life's work, but also sometimes what comes out of of doing that, and like the ingredients for that. Tell me if I'm talking too fast.
No, you're good. You're good for me.
Your brain was always sick.
Yeah.
Like, there you could be. Okay, cool. And then looking at the other side of that, like what tends to be the reasons that we don't pursue this? What tends to be reasons that come up against us? And we can think of the general category of like pleasing, proving, and pretending. So there's societal pressures, sometimes leaning into what makes us different. The things that make us different or unique are often things that in the past we might have been rejected for, or we might have been a little bit on the outside of the group for. And now we're trying to lean into that. And it's often quite hard to do that. It takes a lot of courage to stand apart. The failure, if you're really going for something and it's like different from other people, there's this vulnerability to be seen trying and to possibly fail at what you're trying to do. There's the approval and the attention and the admiration that we seek. Like I said, kind of some of the reasons that I was looking for a career is trying to fulfill that need for approval and attention. So sometimes we seek that, even if it's not particularly what lights us up. Sometimes we want our boss to be approving of what we find interesting or want to do in the practice. Sometimes we want general society, our friends and family. I remember being in this group of, they were physicians, and they were all pursuing a career in coaching. And the most common thing that came up was people are going to be like, you're a doctor. Why are you like giving up this like incredibly approved of, I guess, or like, how do you call it? High
Respected.
Yes, that's correct. Thank you. Respected profession to give up something that people generally don't understand or don't think is very, respectful or respectful. That's not the word.
I know what you mean.
We know what I mean. So just sometimes we are so focused on that approval and that attention, that admiration, without focusing on what actually is important to us, what lights us up, what is in alignment with our values. And then obligation to do things a certain way, to keep someone happy. And then character judgment. This is like the category where you think, like if I leave my job, it means X about me. If I, pursue something different, it means that I'm ungrateful for the position that I have, or for my training, or for my parents paying for this or that, or whatever the case is. Or I'm unreliable. I just kind of make this decision and then that decision. I never know what I want, or whatever it is. Not loyal. I'm not resilient because I can't push through and I carry on. So there's these kind of, if I actually follow what I want to do, it means I'm XYZ, and those kind of things can really keep us stuck as well.
Yeah.
So all in all, we want to choose, if you think of like non-renewable and renewable energy, like the renewable has its own sort of feedback loop. If you're doing things out of curiosity and joy and desire and purpose, you will naturally get that energy kind of coming back into your tank, or in this case, fueling your fire. With non-renewable energy, it's draining more than it's actually filling up. So again, the pleasing, proving, pretending, obligation, shoulds and have tos, those come up a lot when we're talking. I should do this, I have to do this, or I can't do this, whatever it is. So those kinds of things, if our fuel is coming from that kind of place, it's going to eventually burn out.
Yeah.
Whereas if it's coming from those other places, it kind of keeps feeding into that and you won't burn out. In fact, you'll just, be more and more lit up by the work that you do. Okay, cool. I'm going to just stop this share for a second and make sure I can still see this. And we're going to go through a few questions. Okay, cool. So when we're crafting our calling, the main thing we are thinking about is that it's created, it's not found. So thing about your career title. You're not trying to find this magical calling that's already like prepackaged and it's just waiting for you to pick it up. It's really, I'm going to create this calling. And like I said, that kind of upward spiral. Sometimes we just go towards something that we know we find interesting and about that, and we gain some skills, and that mastery kind of sparks even more joy, and we kind of have that upward spiral. So we keep on that life's work. And kind of in that similar vein, you can either choose the end destination, get clear on that, and then from there map out towards today. Or like I said, you can go towards what is the next thing that feels like the right step. And you just kind of keep exploring and you almost expand. I kind of look at a combination of these two to say. Okay, so first we're going to just take a step back. We're not going to worry about what you actually do now for a living, irrelevant at the moment. We're going to dive a little bit deeper, get a little bit existential, look at the bigger picture. So can you think of some things that were interests and inclinations for you as a child already? Like things that you love to do or naturally spend time doing, or that people were like, oh, you're amazing at this, or whatever it is. Can you think of anything of those?
Yeah, for me, what I loved doing as a kid was reading and writing. So reading like just all the time, or just devour books. Still do now. It's something I rediscovered, which is really nice.
Amazing.
And then writing as well for me. Like I used to when I was younger, like I mean they were rubbish, but I still did them. But I thought they were great when I was 8 or 9 years old. And I would write like stories. I had these books that were like full of poems I'd written and short stories. And
That's
I
amazing.
was so confident. I mean, I would love the confidence as a kid. Like I would take these stories I'd written into school and be like, tell the teacher to read it to the class. You know?
That's amazing. Like I want the confidence of 8-year-old Jill.
Yeah, I'm like, look what I created. Isn't that cool? Read it to the class. You know?
So cool. I love that. That's amazing.
Yeah, so that was a big thing that I really loved. And then something else that I became like good at later on, like in high school or like into university and stuff, was speaking and presenting. Like it's something that I always like. I enjoyed doing it when I was a little bit older, and I would always get good like compliments from. You know, I always thought it was something that everyone found a nice thing to do. I always found that everyone else thought it was like energizing and fun. And they
Meanwhile, everyone's like, that's my worst nightmare.
And I remember someone saying to me, like, how do you just stand there and talk? And I was like, what do you mean? And then I was like, oh, I can do that, you know?
That's really cool. Yeah.
So like for me, those are kind of like the three like big areas where I've always well, for a very long time I've enjoyed doing it, and I've other people have maybe said I was good at it. Yeah.
That's really cool. I love that. Yeah. It's amazing when you get those moments where just it sparks something for you, like, oh, not everyone loves this or like finds this interesting or whatever. Yeah. And you just sort of assume that, you know, people experience life pretty similar to you.
Exactly.
That's awesome. I also was a big devourer of books when I was little, and like exploring on the farm, but I never had, like, we live on a farm, and I don't remember ever like being interested in like, what plants is this?
Yeah.
What's this, whatever. So I was always exploring, but I was always like in my imagination, in like, you know, I was thinking of these other worlds, and not necessarily like, because some people really love being outdoors, and we'll go through this now. There's like different forms of intelligence. And one of them is like the natural environment, and you're just so drawn to like learning what this plant is and that animal, and just like immersing yourself within that. But that's really cool.
But that was never you. You never had that.
No.
Okay.
No.
You're imagining the fairies that were living under the log.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Oh goodness. Okay. The next question is, what rabbit holes and curiosities do you find yourself going down that other people don't find that interesting? So for you, one of them might be like speaking and presenting, that kind of area. Is there anything else that you find like even if it's like a topic, or I think you said astrophysics, right? That you also have like
Yeah,
this interest
yeah.
in.
Like I was just thinking of that now. That's like my YouTube rabbit hole. And sometimes when I can't fall asleep, I'll like it's bad to have my phone in my room, but I'll put on a video of Neil deGrasse Tyson talking
I
about
love that.
astrophysics. I'm such a
This
nerd.
is my wind down. He's so
Um,
awesome. He's amazing.
yeah, like I think first of all, like so rabbit holes like what I've been done recently is like actual like writing stuff. So like I've been watching a lot of videos or TikToks or like reading stuff about like the writing process, like how people get
It's so
published, like
cool.
how like stories should be set up, or those kind of things that I've never known about. So it's been really cool to learn.
Mm.
Um, and then yeah, for me, like astrophysics, astronomy stuff, like I find so fascinating. And if I had enjoyed actual physics more, it's probably
Mm.
something I would have loved to have done. But I think the actual act of doing physics was just I'm really never enjoyed that. But
Okay.
I love the information and the theories that come out of it.
Like
Um,
learning about it.
yeah,
Yeah.
love like learning
It
about
makes
that
a lot of
stuff.
sense.
Yeah. And then what's also really cool to me is watching people like Neil deGrasse Tyson, or there's another lady called Becky Smith-Thurston who does astrophysics
Oh,
stuff.
I don't know her.
Yeah, she's really cool. She's they take these complicated subjects and they present
Mm.
it at a level that's easy enough to understand, but they're not
Mm.
condescending or patronizing or anything like that,
Exactly.
and they're entertaining with their information. So I think I find that also
Exactly.
like inspiring of like how they do that, because I would love to do that
Exactly.
with
It's such
my
a
own.
skill.
Yeah, yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. I love that because some people kind of find this like, I really struggle with that a lot, like bringing complex things and like really simplifying them. So I
Yeah.
also like, I really admired when people could do that.
Mm.
And also, like you said, that entertaining and realizing that making something entertaining doesn't mean you now kind of diminish how important it is or how like, complex or whatever.
Yeah,
It's just that we genuinely do respond better when it's like it's told in a story or like an interesting, you know,
exactly.
um,
Yeah,
way of putting it. And that helps people learn as well. So
yeah,
really cool. I love
yeah.
that.
Mm.
I remember also when I was studying and I was the class rep, we were in this kind of meeting with the people that, come and um, look at the course and whether it was okay, whatever that word was for that.
Yeah.
Um, but everyone was kind of chatting and they were saying, what are your favorite subjects? And I was like, STEM pathology and diagnostics and physiology. And then the people around me were like, what?
Really?
They're like, those are like the worst subjects. So they're like, we like
Really?
adjusting, like the adjusting classes and the like the massage and the dry
Like
needling, or maybe not massage, but
more
the
like
dry
like
needling and stuff like
yeah, the
that.
like
Yeah,
hands-on
exactly.
stuff they loved. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And it was sort of also the first time I sort of realized, oh, okay, I really enjoy like the mental side of it, but the
Mm-hmm.
actual like physical treating stuff has always been the thing that I enjoy best.
Exactly.
So also those kinds of
For me
like
it's very
sparks.
similar. Yeah, because I think when that's why it's so hard, and I think why like I was kind of caught where I am now in this like we study for so long to become a chiropractor, or anyone else
Mm,
that studies really long to become a certain profession. You don't know what the profession is going to look like while you're studying. You literally have no idea.
mm,
And I, the same as you, I really love that academic world of learning and
mm,
studying and all those things like that, and like being involved in that side, which made me think
mm,
that I therefore loved what the profession was. And
exactly.
then,
Exactly.
yeah, so I think that's
And then
often,
you're sort of confused with like, why am I not enjoying
yeah,
this? Like, I loved it when
exactly.
I was learning
Yeah,
about it. Yeah,
yeah,
that makes a
exactly.
lot of sense. And I think just also for people watching this, it's something that that I think is really important is to notice whether there's things within your profession that you like or find interesting in terms of content, because
Mm,
the actual what you do can be so different. Maybe you're a full-time researcher, maybe you're a writer, maybe you're a speaker. You don't
mm,
have to always be like hands-on physically seeing a patient to stay within your field. And if
mm,
there's something, for example, disc pathology that really just fascinates you, you can go and be a researcher on that, or write about that or whatever it is.
yeah.
So noticing where the content that it really lights you up versus the thing that you're doing every day. Just be aware that there are so many ways that we can adjust that part without throwing away the stuff that you really genuinely find interesting. I think one of the things that I also discovered is I find content within my profession that I enjoyed and that I found interesting, but it still wasn't the stuff that I really found interesting. Like if I was going to choose from scratch, what am I most fascinated with and interested in? It's not going to be neuromusculoskeletal stuff.
Okay.
Maybe neuro a little bit, but
yeah.
So that can also, I'm just kind of giving different ideas for people of like, choose a slightly different path. And when you really realize like, okay, I need to do something completely different here.
Yeah. Like not getting stuck in the image you have of whatever it is that you do.
Exactly. Because we genuinely have so much room to create what we want and our own path, whether you've ever seen that before or not. Like, that's not the typical chiropractic office or physiotherapy office or occupational therapy, whatever it is. That typical office doesn't have to be the way that you practice just because you're in that profession.
Yeah. And something else I was just thinking of, I don't know if it was the same for you, but usually I'm not talking on the whole here, but generally the people who actually did really well at university, right? Like I was always like, oh, let's get that distinction because apparently that really mattered. You know, but the people who actually they did okay and they passed, but they weren't doing like amazingly well. They're usually the ones who end up they're actually, from what I can tell, are the ones that are actually loving their work at the moment. They're loving what they're doing now. You know, because I guess for them it wasn't about that academic change. It wasn't about the you know, the theoretical, the everything like that. They were just doing that to get to the end point for them, which was to enjoy the actual practical part of it,
like
you know.
Actual practicing,
and
sure,
I think I see that quite a lot. I think a lot of professions do, to be fair, but it's just,
exactly. That's such a good point. And I remember someone saying, I don't remember who this was, but I remember saying like when they're looking to hire someone in their practice, they specifically don't look for people who like were the top achievers because they don't make the best practical clinicians, which I found so fascinating. Okay, so what kinds of things do you feel come naturally to you that other people struggle with? And maybe presenting is one of those that you mentioned, presenting, talking. Maybe learning, like you just automatically want to watch a video about astrophysics.
So weird. So for me, learning, absorbing information is something that comes quite naturally to me. As well as as you said, like speaking and presenting is something I can do quite naturally. I think it's because I grew up we have like home videos like documenting a whole life, but basically like the Kardashians, but it never became famous.
That's amazing.
So I think that helped. There was always a camera in my face all the time. So like speaking, presenting, learning, absorbing information. I feel like those things come pretty naturally to me. Yeah.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
And you can also explore the opposite, right? What do you find hard that other people seem to just breeze through?
I find hard. Wow, that was bad English. I'm only speaking English. No, I find it difficult. Like dealing with sameness in a day, like dealing with
monotony and
a monotony in a day. I really struggle with that, and whereas I see other people who really thrive off of that because it's, you know, there's a habit and a ritual created within it, and it's something that they thrive off of. Whereas for me, it's something that really drains me. So for me, like that monotony of it's something I struggle with. There's lots of things I probably struggle with, so there's not.
That's a good one to start with.
It's a good one to start with.
Because that really relates to one of your struggles within the career. So I just wanted to mention some of the types of intelligence, and this is just for people who you might struggle to identify what comes naturally to you and what you're good at. It's often like, when you a fish in water, you don't realize that you're in water. It's just like your natural, normal environment.
Yeah.
So there's things like visual or spatial, like you see things in 3 dimensions very well. Often these are people who are creative and good with spatial reasoning, often professions like architecture or design or something like that.
That's
And then
definitely
there's
something I'm not good
linguistics.
at, by the way.
I think the same. There's like these, it was like this intelligence thing or like skills building apps, and you had to like, anyway, it was basically puzzles around like seeing things in 3D, and I could not for the life of me. And I remember this as well, seeing in our profession as well. A lot of my mentors said to me, you have to visualize the body in 3D when you're treating. And I always had this thing of like, I really struggled to do that. Like, and I
Yeah.
was so admiring of people who could just like visualize that in 3D.
Yeah.
So I think
Yeah.
people also tend to be better practically when they have some sort of better
Mm.
spatial reasoning.
Yeah.
Then there's linguistic and verbal, which might be one of yours.
Yeah.
You can put feelings and thoughts into words. You're drawn to reading and writing, sometimes public speaking. So that's quite a strong
Oh,
one
it's
for
me.
you. Yeah. Logical and mathematical, so people who are very good at numbers and maths, recognizing patterns, solving puzzles, strategy. Existential, so you tend to think about things a bit deeper than other people. Sometimes they call this spiritual intelligence, but you generally tend to be quite philosophical, and you tend to think about like the bigger picture and the meaning of life. This is definitely one I resonate with, and also the linguistic one. And then there's body kinesthetic, so mind-body coordination comes naturally to you. You're good at fine and gross motor skills.
Yeah.
Dancing, sports, some forms of medicine where it's quite practical, or professions like a lot of hand-eye coordination or mind-body coordination. Musical intelligence, so you recognize tone and pitch, you're drawn towards music. That one's pretty self-explanatory. And then interpersonal, so you're good at like getting along with other people, you're good at reading them, you're very empathic, you get along with others very easily. And then there's intrapersonal, where you're very good at understanding your own thoughts and feelings and just the general kind of human condition. And again, kind of like the other one, you tend to be quite philosophical as well because of that. And then naturalistic, that was the other one, kind of your natural world and environment, you're very drawn to that.
Okay.
What I'd also recommend, I'll send this link with the replay as well. There's a free survey that you can do on your character strengths. It's a little bit longer, that's why I didn't kind of include it in the presentation itself. But you can get a good sense of what your character strengths are. And one of them is love of learning, which might be one of your top ones as well. So that's just all these questions are kind of to get a sense of like, what are your natural inclinations, your natural strengths and interests. And one of the points that I wanted to make is you don't always have to follow things that you're naturally good at. For example, if you are really passionate about a certain, let's say, area of, let's say, neurological conditions, right? And you are like this academic person, you study it and you research it. And then at some point you realize, in order to like get this out, I need to become better at speaking. And maybe you're not very natural at speaking, and you learn the skills and all of that. So it can be, you can always supplement with things, but the majority, or like the main direction, you want to have some kind of natural inclination in terms of interest and in terms of your strengths. And then that always builds on each other. Okay. So another existential question. What breaks your heart about the world?
Oh,
And you can also think about what breaks your heart the most about the world. What is the most, because there might be a lot of things, but what is like to you the thing that kind of sits in your brain sometimes?
That's a good question. Yeah, a big one for me is people feeling like, I watched this documentary on like psych wards and things like that in the UK. And it was like these people that were so like down and deep and dark in such severe depression and suicidal ideation, and um yeah, like just seeing people that feel so hopeless, uh
Mm.
that's really like that really did break
Mm.
my heart. Yeah.
It's
Mm.
really good to note, not obviously it's not a pleasant thing to think about, but just to notice like where that is. And sometimes we can think about like where does our heartbreak around the world overlap with maybe what we want to do or
Mm.
what we find interesting or
Yeah.
whatever it is, because that also gives us quite a strong direction and yeah, that purposefulness and that meaning behind our work.
Yeah. That's a really good question, though. I feel like that's something also I need to think more on, because I think what I tend to do with like news and stuff around the world or things that make me feel uncomfortable is like I I push it away. I don't want to think about it.
Mm,
Um,
mm,
so I'm thinking now, and like that just came to my mind because I'd watched this documentary, but I'm sure
mm,
there's other things that I've
exactly.
just pushed away, but it's good to know.
Exactly. And you
Yeah.
can definitely explore that a little bit more. I had the same experience where someone kind of asked me that, and I hadn't really thought about that. And
Mhm.
I was surprised at my answer. I couldn't exactly remember exactly what it was, but it was
Yeah.
along the lines of whether that's because you have like there's actual oppression or like some reason you can't pursue essentially this, like your life's calling, like that, like someone has this incredible like talent and skill and interest, but they can't do that thing either because of societal like pressures or
Yeah.
norms, or
Yeah.
because they literally don't have, the means to do
Needs
that,
to do
or
it.
they are in a
Mm.
certain position socioeconomically that it's just not possible.
Yeah.
So just imagining kind of all this like incredible life that
Mm.
is like lost because
Yeah.
of that.
Yeah. There's actually
So
something else now that's come to mind with you saying that, and it was
yeah.
okay, and I was watching, I should stop watching so much TV clearly. But it was like all about like it was all about injustice basically, and about how women back in the day just weren't given a voice, and no matter how
Mm,
intelligent they were, all the good ideas they had, they were put down, they weren't given the opportunities. And yeah, that's definitely something that like breaks my heart, is when I see stuff like that
mm,
past happening. Or even now when I see things still happening, even though people think it's not as prevalent, it still is in many
mm,
cases. Um,
exactly.
and just that like inequality, that injustice
Mm,
that exists still.
exactly.
Mm,
Exactly. I was
yeah.
reading a quote earlier. It was something along the lines of like we think about equality, and this has also been a really strong theme in my life, is like
Mm,
equality and justice because of my upbringing as well. But they were talking about like we think of it as sameness, but
mm,
it's almost like actually that equality is giving everyone the equal chance to like bloom. And it is something about like
yeah.
letting 1,000 flowers bloom, or like in this
Mm,
case, like, all these lights light up. Like that's actually what equality is. And we have equal opportunity to do that and not necessarily sameness, which is quite
mm.
cool.